Good morning, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin, and this is my channel, McDuff_2020. And we've got a lot going on today. I really wanted to alert you to Harley Schlanger's blog this morning, published over at LaRouche Pack, and to share with you, if I may, kind of the second half of that blog, which I think is great material to prepare us for the live chat that we'll have in about 40 minutes at 11 a.m. on December 3rd, 2020, here from Mystery Island and from Potsdam, Germany. So without further ado, let me ask you to pay attention, class. Here's our expert, Harley Schlanger, from LaRouche Pack.
The enemy is the British Empire, and let me just throw out a couple of leads. Lord Malloch Brown, a top official of Smartmatic, one of the vote-counting software machines. He has a historic involvement in regime change going back to 1986 in the Philippines, which he's bragged about. He's been involved in numerous coups and regime change operations. He's the boss of George Soros, who many of you know is one of the most important figures in the global regime change operation, including against President Trump. Lord Malloch Brown is a member of the Privy Council of the Queen of England. Is he working for the Chinese Communist Party? Come on, think about it. Now, George Soros, who's he working for? George Soros has been involved in the anti-Trump coup operation from the beginning, but he's also running regime change operations against Russia and China, targeting the three most significant sovereign nation states on the planet in terms of economic power and military power. Russia, China, and the United States, targets for regime change by George Soros. Now, if you think about that, who benefits from the regime change? Who's pushing it? What's called the military-industrial complex. Some of you call it the deep state. We call it the extended British Empire, because that's what it is. It includes the Five Eyes, the intelligence services of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. GCHQ, the NSA equivalent in Britain. MI6. It includes the CIA, the National Security Agency, and the FBI. The global cartels, the financial cartels, the corporate cartels that wrote the terrible trade agreements that ended up deindustrializing the United States, and big tech. These are the anti-Russia, anti-China, and anti-Trump forces which are combining to carry out the vote fraud. So don't fall for the psychological ops and the propaganda. Look at the voting machine companies. There's all this talk about Hugo Chavez in China. Actually, Dominion, the ES&S, and the Hart Intercivic, they're owned by hedge funds that are tied to this financial oligarchy from the City of London. Hedge funds, not Chinese funds. US and British hedge funds are the majority share owners of these companies. Now, what can be done to fight this? Well, President Trump has some things he can do. One, declassify all the documents and release them publicly, which expose who was involved in the coup against him and how they're involved in the vote fraud operation. Two, bring in a special prosecutor, a special counsel to investigate the charges of fraud. We can't inaugurate someone who was, even if there's a minimal chance that he was elected by fraud. In this case, it's a virtual certainty. And third, pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. Bring them back so they can expose the war criminals and cyber criminals who set up a system of mass spying, mass murder through wars, and manipulation and control of the American population. Now, why would they run such a fraud? Well, very quickly, look at what President Trump is doing to reorganize the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. He was planning on doing this from day one of his administration, but Russiagate stopped him. Michael Flynn, who was going to be in charge of reorganizing intelligence, was framed up by the FBI, by Comey, by Peter Strzok. Why has that not been brought out? The war hawks, going back to the Project for a New American Century, the war hawks on Bush and Cheney's payroll, the ones responsible for the Iraq War, for the Libya War under Obama, for the Syrian War under Obama and his team. What was the point of this? The post-Cold War order, which George Herbert Walker Bush called the New World Economic Order. It was to defend a collapsing financial system using wars, in which the U.S. military provided the muscle for this global bankers dictatorship. Now, global bankers dictatorship, excuse me. What is this? This is the Great Reset. The Great Reset is the establishment of a global regime in which no sovereign nation state has control over its credit or spending policies, but that's defaulted to the central banks who operate on behalf of the private banks, the private hedge funds, the shadow banking system. These are the ones running the coup, not the Chinese. And one way to look at this is look at what's happening with Syria. Tony Blinken, the would-be Secretary of State, is an advocate for renewed bombing of Syria. He said the big mistake that Obama made was not to take out the Assad government. They're bringing in people from the Bush, the Obama administration, and some of the war hawks are under Trump, who want to expand the war in Syria and expand more wars in the Middle East. Who's served by these regime change policies? Again, it's the war hawks, the military-industrial complex, the George Soros financial speculators who work for the City of London. That is the enemy. They have the motivation, because Trump was out to overturn their system, by working with Russia, by working with China, by shutting down the military-industrial complex and reorganizing the intelligence community. And they have the capability to rig an election through their control over voting machines and control over the media. Now, December 12th and 13th, the Schiller Institute will be sponsoring a conference which will include a full investigation of where we stand. Remember, the 12th and 13th is the weekend before the Electoral College meets in each of the 50 states to cast their votes. So we'll have a panel on the election process, but also what are the solutions to the economic crisis, to the health care problems, to the famine that's stalking the world. We have solutions. These are solutions which could be implemented under a Trump government, but will not be implemented under a Biden regime, which will escalate the crises that exist and put us on the verge of World War III. So join us. Let's win this fight and do it smartly. Identify the real enemies of this country, the historic enemies of this country, the British oligarchy, the British system that has never forgiven us for our revolution of 1776 and is intending to crush America today on behalf of the financial interests of the City of London and the global central bankers. Don't let them succeed. Thanks for joining me. I'll be taking your questions for tomorrow with the usual Friday questions. Send me an email with your questions at harleysch@gmail.com. Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger.
Wow. Well, Harley Schlanger put it all together in 8 minutes flat for me. I'm sold. I think he's analyzed it correctly. I think there's not any doubt that it is the financial powers, and I say this carefully, the financial powers within the City of London working with the financial powers of the central banks represented by the World Economic Forum. Those combined financial powerhouses are where this is coming from. I'm convinced. If you're not, stick around for a few minutes and Harley will be here at 11 a.m. today. This is December 3rd, 2020, for a live chat right here on McDuff Channel.